Hey, Steve.
Hey, Jim.
You know, you say tomato, and I say tomato.
Well, let me tell you, you say 80s alternative college radio music, and I say Jangle Pop.
Oh, you know what? Let's call the whole thing off.
Fine.
And welcome once again to Two Guys Talking About Records, a Vinyl Community podcast. My name is Jim, and I am a record store owner.
And I'm Steve, a record collector.
You know, I don't want to say that this is our first argument on here, but we're going to get there here now. This whole Jangle Pop thing's got me a little worked up.
It's a deal.
Okay, you're going to try to talk me into using the term Jangle Pop more freely.
Yes.
All right, so
we'll
get
feel
to that.
Better.
Okay, we'll get into that a little bit here on today's episode. But first off, we want to say thank you again to everyone who listens weekly to our little nonsensical podcast where we talk about records, because that's what we do.
That's
apparently.
what we do. That's all we know what to talk about. Our wives, we go home, it's just silence because they don't talk about records.
Well, mine does a little bit because of the store. She has to.
Okay, yeah.
But she doesn't like it, but she has to.
Yes.
So usually, and we'll get to this too, we start with, what did you pick up this week? But you had yourself one big heck of a week this week. You made a road trip.
Yeah, it was. It was a road trip 3 years in the making. I've been. I took the pilgrimage, what I call it, to Noble Records, which was like 751 miles.
Wow. I
was going to fly. I thought, no, I'm just driving. We're going to see the country. I'm going to do it in one day. And it was a really early start, but made it down there, raining a lot of the trip, but well worth it. And I met up with, a number of people from the vinyl community. I met 9 different people by the time we were done. They're part of the vinyl community. We went out record shopping and to Noble Records. And I will say Dylan from Noble was very nice guy, really, really nice, very enjoyable. I've known him through the vinyl community. We started our channels at about the same time. I'm up to 3,000 and he's up to 100,000, something. I don't know, something went wrong in between there. But, really a big thank you to a guy, his name's Dave, and his channel's the VC Ambassador. He really made sure I had a great time. We went out to a ball game, to their AAA club, and then he got us VIP passes to the Weezer concert. And so there's Future Islands, we saw that group, which I like, and then Weezer, and we had our own bathroom. I mean, what more could you ask for? Nice seats where I didn't have to, everyone could stand up and I could still see. I didn't have to stand up. So we had 4 record stores. And I was going to retire next year. That was my plan, but it looks like I'm working an extra year just to pay off this road trip.
So you really put the community in vinyl community with this trip.
It is, and that's what it's about. I've met, I figured it out, 26 different people that do either videos or just part of it. And that's, I had someone write, they go, I thought about coming, but I don't make videos. I go, I wrote back, says, that doesn't matter. You collect records. That's all that matters. You don't have to make a video. Let me know. I would love to meet you. I'd love to go out. And I've had a few of those.
That's cool. And Noble Records too, by the way. Side note for those that aren't familiar, both as a channel and a record store, he excels at both of those, doesn't he?
He does. He finds the rarest of the rare records that you will never see anywhere. Last year I bought a lot of Zamrock, music from Zambia that is extreme rare to find. He found someone who was able to bring them in, and you just look at his wall and it's incredible what he finds. But There's a lot of great collections down there, and he's very good at doing it.
So we can both aspire to be a little bit more like Dylan and Noble. You on the channel side with the YouTube, and me from the record store side.
Well, I don't know if I can afford you for you doing that. Okay. It's bad enough already.
I haven't haven't been too bad finding collections. When we do,
No,
we do.
Yeah, you have. It's cost, and I just couldn't imagine though if I'm down there with Noble. Right? I mean, no, it would be bad. I'm just once every 5 years is good.
There you go. Well, are you ready to talk about your pickups this week?
Yeah, I am, and I'm just going to give it was a huge stack, so I'm just going to throw out a couple of them that I found. One of them was Mike Nione. And this was Zamrock. I Can't Understand You. It came out in 1976. This is a very rare Zamrock album. If you look on Discogs, I think 2 people have it, 268 want it. And it was in pretty good shape, considering it's out of Africa. And it plays through, and the cover wasn't too bad. So that was neat. I picked up actually from Vinyl Me Please, Thelonious Monk Septet. Monk's Music came in. Really good Thelonious Monk album. You were getting into Thelonious.
A little bit, yep.
Yeah.
And the VMP stuff is always primo.
Yeah. Clifton Chenier. I finally found I used to have a classic Chenier. And this Clifton Chenier is Zydeco, down in Louisiana, which is probably the happiest. It's just a mix of like Cajun and country, but the accordion leads the way, along with the Clifton's brother Cleveland plays the what's it called? It's the washboard.
Okay.
And you hang it on them and then you use spoons and you're there and you're making the beat go. It is just joyful music. I love it. And then I bought this. I bought it for the title, and there's times I question what I do, and this is one of them. The name of the group was Psychobilly Corn Crumpets. How bad can it be?
Did you mean to say corn? Oh, I'm familiar with these. Or was it another word that rhymes with that starts with the letter P?
No, it was corn.
Corn,
on there.
okay.
It was corn crumpets.
All right.
And actually,
my mistake.
And I'm still trying to wrap my head and question my sanity. But what about you?
Well, it was an odd all over the map week for me. First up, and I'll talk about this with you down the line further, is this group called Master Dance. And the album is called Feelin' Dead. Now, it's a new album. It's a compilation from a group from the late 60s, early 70s, Detroit acid punk rock. Think MC5, think Amboy Dukes. Very, very obscure group. They never put an album out, but they had a 7-inch promo that is in the quadruple digits. I found one a couple years ago. This is that group I told you about.
Yeah.
So they got together, they found these old master tapes, had them cleaned up and remixed and put out an album proper for Master Dance. And this thing is just great. It is everything that you love about that Detroit acid rock / garage rock / Stooges / MC5. It's all of that put together. The sound that really Detroit was known for in that era in this one group.
It's so funny how they find these tapes that at the time there's no way we can put this out. No one's going to buy this crap, and so it just becomes it disappears, and then they find it, and now you listen and go, oh my God, why wasn't this released? Well, maybe back then everyone would have shook their head and go, I don't get it.
I just wonder if the release of this makes that 7-inch that I sold a long time ago a little less valuable, because I pulled in $1,200 on that sucker.
Wow,
holy cow.
man.
Then I brought in, and this is just sheer, I don't know why I did this, because I like pinball. I've always loved playing pinball back to my high school days and into college, where I probably should have been studying a little bit more than I did. But Jackpot Records released a pair of records called Jackpot Plays Pinball, Volume 1 and Volume 2. And essentially it's just music from pinball machines from the golden era in the 80s and 90s. So, and that's it. It's just music from pinball machines.
Oh, okay. I can't say I've ever put in a quarter to listen to the music. But if you're a pinballer, it's got to be exciting.
You don't really think about it, but it's coming back to me. It's, oh, yeah, I recognize that one. Oh, yeah. So, and then lastly, and this one caught me completely by surprise, it's a group called The Equals. And one of those ones that I think I may have heard of it before, but I wasn't quite sure. And the album was Baby Come Back. And I'm going to admit something to those that shop here. This one made it to the shelf because it got by me. And then one day after it was on the shelf, after it went out, I thought, well, I'm going to listen to this. And I got a couple of seconds and I threw it on. I went, holy cow, this is being pulled off. So the Equals, 1968, the album is called Baby Come Back. And right off the bat, it starts with this song, Baby Come Back, that sounds like Dwayne Eddy or The Ventures. It's got that old garagey guitar twang to it. And then it kicks into something that's part ska, part psych rock, and I can't even explain it, just great garage rock. Come to find out that the lead singer in the Equals, in 1968, playing this mishmash of stuff, very distinctive voice, none other than Eddie Grant.
Oh, wow.
Remember Electric Avenue?
Yep.
Eddie Grant. And he's singing on this one from the Equals. He's the lead singer. I'm floored by this. It's really catchy. I'll play it for you a little bit later, but you get a chance, look this one up. It's really fun stuff. And it's not a tremendously valuable album, but it's just a great one to have. So.
It's just fun to get.
Yep.
I have to just, back to that pinball. When you play that pinball music, do your thumbs start to twitch?
Just a little bit. Yeah. And then the hips sway a little bit.
Yeah.
Then I hit the turntable, and instead of a tilt, I get a skip. Go figure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, onward to the subject at hand. We teased about this earlier. And for those not in the know, I am an old college radio guy. We've talked about this before. Going back to my days in college at Northern Michigan University, 1985, 86, I started working at the college radio station. The golden era for this type of music, college radio, alternative music. Yeah. And for the better part of my life, I've always referred to this as alternative music, college radio music. And then a couple months back, Steve starts dropping the term Jangle Pop on his videos on his YouTube channel and talking about Jangle Pop in the store. And I was like, hold on, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, REM, Jangle Pop. I have to admit, I've never heard this term before.
Okay. To me, when you think of college rock, I don't consider that necessarily a genre, but more of a medium that encompasses post-punk, jangle pop, power pop, pop rock, even folk rock. It came about, to me, college rock, from what I remember, when College Music Journal magazine decided, okay, we are going to, they decided in 1982 we're going out to all the FM stations that are in college. And so they began going there, and they had this music that was not top 40. But it was a variety of different things that you could get. And so, and what I always found it was interesting with this was, it was music that they said appealed to the people that wanted something better, like college students. Music that was, for the smarter people, So we're not out looking at this electro synth. It's not the Thompson Twins or Duran Duran. No. This is it. This is what the smart people listen to. But it encompassed so many different subgenres, I guess you could say.
Well, the research side of me called up a few things, and let's talk about this as you attempt to convince me that this is the term I should be using.
All right.
Let's start straight up with the dictionary. And the word jangle is out there. So according to the dictionary, the tried and true dictionary, as a verb, the word jangle is to produce a harsh, discordant sound as two comparatively small, thin, or hollow pieces of metal hitting together. As a verb used with an object, jangle is to make a harsh, discordant, usually metallic sound, as in he jangled the pots and pans. As a noun, a harsh, discordant sound, and possibly even an argument. So, okay, jangle, you're jangling your keys, something metallic kicking through there. Wikipedia steps in and helps us with the term jangle pop. And as you mentioned, it's a subgenre of pop rock or college rock. We're on the same track here, but emphasizes the jangly, and again, think of that dictionary, the jangly guitars and 1960s style pop melodies. Now, I didn't realize this, but the term jangle pop actually had its origination in the 60s. But it didn't become popular as a word being tossed about until the 1980s with the advent of REM. But the word, actually, this is according to Wikipedia, if you trust it, got its, it was coined basically from the Byrds version of the Bob Dylan song, Mr. Tambourine Man. And the lyric, it's the, in the jingle jangle of the morning, I'll come following you.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. It's that very distinctive sound of guitar. They say it's the chiming sound of a 12-string Rickenbacker in the upper register strings.
Yep. And REM is said to be the very first group that was considered, Jangle Pop. When they came out with Chronic Town and Murmur. Peter Buck said it's the return of the Rickenbacker from Roger McGuinn, because of this chiming sound that was happening. And yes, to your point, it was from that, and the movement where they really began looking at the music from the Byrds, the Soft Boys, Big Star, even the Beatles. It was more of a poppier, kind of a happier sound, coming in. You hear more of a snare drums going on than, harder tom-toms. And generally harmonies, brighter harmonies. And so it began to catch on. REM, there was other groups doing it, but REM really brought it to the forefront. But it was still considered college rock because REM didn't become big for another 6 years. And so they were college rock. Then once they became popular, hey, you're mainstream now, buddy.
Well, there's a great many things that I don't really remember about the 80s. So the term Jangle Pop being bantied about could very well be one of them from those, those disconnect years where I was having fun in college radio. But I guess it makes sense. I mean, that style of music was unlike anything. And we talked about this when we covered the songs and the music that was instrumental in our shaping our lives. And up until that time when I went to college, it had been AC/DC, Def Leppard, and Rush. And I'm not going to knock Rush, but very, very distorted, heavier guitar sounds. And as you mentioned, the very deep thrumming drums and heavier bass. And then all of a sudden, it just takes this 180 with this very bright sound of the guitar kicking up. And yeah, you could very well compare it to the Beatles, the Byrds. There's several Beatles songs that have that very bright, airy, and tight snare drum sound to them, but that's the Beatles. You're going to call that the Beatles.
Yeah. So
REM comes along with many others, but as you mentioned, REM I think was really at the forefront, and that whole Athens, Georgia movement, the sound that came out of there was so influential to a lot of bands in that time.
Yeah, and when REM first started, they were a punk rock band. And so they're in Athens and they're trying to play punk rock, but Athens was bohemian. And it was all this boho movement going on. They'd have these parties, like in lofts up above different businesses, and they had these huge lofts where they'd have these parties. And the B-52s were there, Pylon, and and REM was actually considered outsiders, and a lot of people in Athens didn't even like them because, well, these guys, they're not even directly from Athens. They're coming in, but they're going to the college. But they listened to what was happening and began to change their sound from this punk rock into something different. And Peter Buck found, what he found what he could do with the guitar. Mm-hmm. And again, the Byrds was a huge influence, this chiming sound, which he made so different. I mean, when you put on Murmur, nothing else sounded like Murmur.
No, I'll agree.
Yeah, it came out and everyone was scratching their head. What do you call this music? Because we want to label everything. Everything needs a label. Yep. Otherwise, Discogs would fall apart. But how do you classify this? College rock was one, but then there was this Jangle Pop began to take over because other groups were listening to this. Goes, man, I like the sound of this, and it was just taking music as usual from another era. This time 60s. We always seem to go back about 20 years a lot of times when new music comes in because that's a new group of people that are discovering that. but they want to make it their own. And so you had the punk that had been there, but it was more almost of a, you know what, I don't want like all this electro synth stuff's going on. We need to bring back the guitar. And here's the other thing about Jangle Pop. Jangle Pop is American. It does not, there are no British bands considered part of Jangle Pop. College rock, though, there are. You know, the Smiths, the Cure, all that. But Jangle Pop was a pure American thing, and it began to morph. Out in California, it became the Paisley Underground. It's the same kind of stuff, but it was interesting on the Paisley Underground how that name came about is there was a group of the 3 O'Clock.
Yep.
And the lead singer was listening to another group, and the female was singing, actually kind of doing a spoken word piece in there. And she was wearing a red paisley dress at the time. And part of her, and then she goes, and that is the word of the Paisley Underground is part of what she was saying. She spoke that out. And so the lead singer from the 3 O'Clock, his name was Michael Quercio. I'm saying it wrong. It doesn't really matter. He liked that, and he's talking with her afterwards. Well, a couple of days later, he's talking with some of the media, say from a magazine, and they're asking him, well, what type of music do you have with these chiming guitars and stuff? And he goes, it's the Paisley Underground. He took it from her, and it just took off from there. And you had, so the Paisley Underground movement, took off, and you had like the 3 O'Clock, the Bangles. If you listen to the very first Bangles, it is Jangle Pop, but it's done more with the West Coast sound. And, the Bangles and 3 O'Clock, they were really looking at Big Star. But then you had like the Long Riders. Graham Parsons and the Byrds was their inspiration. Green on Red, Graham Parson. But all of these were using that Rickenbacker type sound when they first started, which was Jangle Pop, but California had their own version going on.
Kind of like, they're borrowing from this psychedelic rock sound a little bit in the jangly. So they're that California psych.
It is, yes, it is very true. Definitely the California psych that was happening. So this was another version that was different than what was happening on to the East Coast, but it still fell into this kind of a neat, the Dream Syndicate, their very first album. Now, all these groups morphed, when you look at, like, the Long Riders became more country rock.
Yep. And
they became they heavily influenced Wilco, Sun Volt, those type of groups. Green on Red began going country rock, but then like the Byrds, they went country rock also.
I find, earlier you mentioned that because of Discogs, we've got to find this way to label everything. And I find that at times in the 80s, it was a lot simpler. When I did work radio then, and I worked a few different radio stations, obviously the college radio station, but I put in my time on talk radio, I did country radio, I did oldies, but at that time, we were limited in the genres. There was no such thing as classic rock. Yeah. It was rock. You did rock, you did oldies, you did country, or you did the jazz and the classic were lumped together with public radio primarily, or you did alternative because the college radio was the alternative to all of these other genres. And that's kind of what stuck with me is whether it's punk, it's alternative, it's punk like the Sex Pistols or the Dead Kennedys, or fun punk like the Dead Milkmen or They Might Be Giants. But then we can begin splintering off of that alternative. And I think that I've been stuck on, this is just my college radio. Well, for crap's sake, that was 30 years ago. So now what am I doing? 40? Oh, shoot, it's 40 years ago. What year is this?
Oh, it's scary.
Holy cow.
Well, the college rock, I said there was they just had this sensibility that it's not commercial mainstream music.
Exactly.
It's not going to be that, but it was also for the elite and discerning group, which were the students.
Well, we were better than everybody at that point.
Yes. But then you had this indie or alt rock coming in, and again, this was from music that was often considered more hostile to the mainstream. It was that do-it-yourself attitude that was coming. Yeah. So it was a different version. You had college rock that really was appealing to the college kids, but now the hardcore began coming in and morphing up. Again, it wasn't mainstream. Yep. It probably fell under the whole, when you look at the college rock, charts, it would be in there, but a whole different type of genre was happening.
Punk rock. I hate to bring generationals into this, but Gen X, I think the Gen X, and I'm a Gen Xer proud. I did make the cut on Gen X. Just kind of the attitude that comes across in there. Now, like everything else, this is going to evolve. REM, as you mentioned, I would really argue nowadays especially too, but with a lot of their later albums, once you get out of the late 80s, became much more pop-oriented. Even though they had some jangle sound, it just wasn't the same as their earlier stuff.
They did. And what happened is they sold a lot more records, too.
Yes, they did.
I mean, it's just part, I think, of an evolution that happens is as a band grows. You don't want to get stuck. I'm reading a book from Bono, from U2, and it was how they were always worried when they did Joshua Tree that everyone's going to label them Americana, that they're stuck. What do we need to do to break out of this? Well, what did they come up with? They came up with Achtung Baby.
Yep.
Totally went the other way. REM, I think, too, was, we need to keep changing. How do we grow as a group? And they made some incredibly good albums.
Oh, yeah.
But a lot of people will say the best REM was that early stuff. Mm-hmm. That, I think, really comes from those that were into the whole college rock scene, because they were a big part of that. Jangle Pop. And even us old baby boomers were finding enjoyment with that.
So I took the opportunity to head over to our good friends at Spotify, which of course you can listen to us, two guys talking about records on, to just type in Jangle Pop to see what would come up on a playlist. Now, there's going to be lots of user-generated playlists, and quite frankly, you and I have done these before, and if you're a Spotify user, you can put anything on a playlist you want and call it anything you want. But the one that I found was a Spotify-generated playlist called Jangle Pop Mix. And guess what? Right up top of that list, number one it's REM. This one off of Reckoning, though, with Harbor Code. But then we see things on there like the Smiths and Camper Van Beethoven, Take the Skinheads Bowling. And I'm coming around. But what I hear in my head when I see these songs listed all together in somebody else's mix and not my iPod is that certain sound of that guitar, that very bright and jangly, for lack of a better term. Mayor of Simpleton, XTC. I see a Big Star on here. Teenage Fan Club. Aztec Camera. Guadalcanal Diary. Great. I love Guadalcanal Diary is such a great group. They're like REM, but you never hear of them.
Yeah.
What else is on here? The Lemonheads. The Replacements. Robin Hitchcock and the Egyptians are on here. More REM. Matthew Sweet. Again, more Smiths are on here as well. There was a few very surprising ones. I see the Smithereens on here as well. I don't know if I'd go that far to call them, because that's a heavier guitar sound coming from them. The LAs, they're the ones that did...
There She Goes.
There it is. I couldn't remember that just at the moment. So any of these can be found and repeated throughout on this Jangle Pop mix. So Spotify's on board with it.
Yeah, and their only problem with their mixes, they had some British ones in there, and proper Jangle Pop had no British in there. But Johnny Marr definitely had that Rickenbacker sound. Johnny Marr had pure jangle going on some of that stuff. So I could see why it's just that a Jangle Pop person would say no. But even the Replacements, their later albums, Let It Be, there is some jangly pop, Pleased to Meet You, you're going to hear that. As they toned themselves down and began really writing and saying, okay, we're going to make some hits, or stuff that people are really going to want, and not loud and snotty. Some of that music, if you listen, is very much what fall into that genre.
Well, I think I am coming around on this.
Boy, it's not easy to get this guy to come around on something. Let me tell you.
Not at least. There's one other thing I did find on Discogs. I just typed in Jangle on Discogs, and it brings up the Archies from 1969 with the song Jingle Jangle.
Jingle Jangle.
Does that count?
No.
Oh,
No.
Okay.
Yeah. It is a fun. It's to me it's a very fun genre. There's some great stuff out there. I think of like the Plimsolls, even early Liars.
Yep.
Had this sound, but and it did morph. Even female artists began to kind of change when I looked into a little more serious. Susan Vega, Tracy Chapman, Indigo Girls, all of them kind of started with that sound, but then they began to morph into more of a singer-songwriter kind of thing. But
A little folksy.
Yeah, more folksy. But that's what was happening even with some of these other groups as they changed. But that's how a group is, right? Sometimes we have a hard time when a group changes because we really like that last album. We want it again. But if you're in a group, it's about growing.
You're preaching to the choir on that one, and this is speaking as a Rush fan.
Yes.
So you're convincing me to use the term Jangle Pop. A few episodes down the line, I'm going to convince you to listen to some Rush and be a Rush fan. Okay. But it's that same thing. The bands, especially ones that have some legs, some longevity, and they're around for a couple of decades. The sound of the 80s is the sound of the 80s, whether it be pop or Jangle Pop or punk. It's very recognizable as this is from the 80s. And I think as that decade moved into the 90s, it becomes a little more refined. And so these groups that stay together through there will adapt and will move through. And even now, I guess I'm having trouble saying college radio, because college radio music now is not the college radio, because we're removed by 35 to 40 years now at this point from my college radio days. So I can't call it that.
I guess there must still be college radio charts out there, but I'm so out of the loop with that. It makes me wonder.
You have to go back and discover new music like we talked about last week.
You do. You do. And, every week I try, on my morning show to show a new album from each year. I showed another new one that came out again, this year, because it's important, but maybe not so much the psychobilly corn crumpets.
No, but even to that point, though, we talked about Wet Leg last week. Very poppy, very bright music, very catchy tunes. But I'd be hard-pressed to hear a jangle inside of that. I considered it to be alternative to everything else that's going on with this, but I couldn't classify it in that jangle type. Could you?
No, I would not. It could be more like punk pop.
There we go. We're dividing these genres up so far. This may warrant an episode all unto itself. Is some of the weirdest subgenres on Discogs that could be found.
Well, we've sat around here at times and we've looked up records and they come up with these genres and we're just looking at who made that up. I mean, what does that even mean?
Like erotic polka?
Yes, exactly. Man.
Well, okay. I guess I'm going to go so far as to say that you have convinced me, Steve.
Okay.
I will begin from this point forward to begin using the term Jangle Pop a little more freely when referring to my music of the 80s.
Okay. I just feel like I've done my part for humanity. And so, yeah, it was great. I'll sleep better tonight.
Okay. Well, we can change. I can be adapting to this. We'll do that. All right. Well, thank you very much, Steve, and thank you all for listening again to Two Guys Talking About Records, a Vinyl Community podcast. I knew we'd come away with this without getting at each other, going, "Hey, it's not Jangle Pop." Anyhow, well, you got some resting to do, don't you?
I do. I'm heading flying out to Nebraska tomorrow. It's been a long week. And I bought all these records. I get home and all I've been doing is working. I think I've listened to 2 albums in 2 days. So yeah,
you got some catching up to do.
I do. Yes.
Well, thanks again, folks. And hey, it's also the holiday weekend, so everybody enjoy the independence that you get from independent record stores and independent music.
Nice plug. Well done.
How's that?
Yes.
All right. We will talk to you all next week. And thanks again for listening to Two Guys Talking About Records, a Vinyl Community podcast.
I'm Steve, a record collector.
And I am Jim, a record store owner. We'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye.